Hello everyone, welcome to the Microdesk webinar series. My name is Ravli Ravalapati and I'm the Marketing Manager for the California region. Welcome to today's webinar, Quantity Takeoff for 5D Analysis. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, Microdesk is an Autodesk Gold, Oracle, and Google partner. We provide technology training and consulting solutions for the AEC industry. We have 11 offices located throughout the East and West Coast with a staff of over 90 consulting and technical specialists. Over the next hour, we'll go over the Autodesk Quantity Takeoff streamlines the estimating process and ensure accuracy when performing cost analysis. Learn how QTO is in conjunction with Autodesk's family of BIM products, which will help you significantly reduce the amount of time necessary to prepare design and construction estimates and minimize errors and omissions. Presenting today's session is Microdesk Solutions Specialist Leo Salce. Leo is an architect here with Microdesk, and he specializes in helping firms implement BIM technology with both Revit and AutoCAD-based platforms and helps integrate sustainable design applications into their workflows. He has developed BIM and CAD standards for various architecture firms and government agencies. He's also a designer with over 10 years of experience in designing, managing BIM CAD, and construction document production. Just a few logistics before we begin. In order to minimize any background distractions, you're all on mute for the duration of the session. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the question area of the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen. Leo will address as many questions as he can at the end of the presentation. If we run out of time, we'll provide you with our contact information so you can follow up with us. And now I'll turn it over to Leo.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Leo Salce, and thank you, Ravali. Today's webinar is on Autodesk Quantity Takeoff 2012 on the current version for 5D analysis, where you're going to take the model to the next level. Whether you're using BIM or you're just having standard documentation, PDFs, CAD, scan drawings, no matter what you have available, I'll show you how Autodesk Quantity Takeoff can be a helpful tool to be integrated into your workflow. Now, one of the things about Quantity Takeoff is it's a tool that has not been around for too long, but there's a lot of documentation and resources now online, and there's a lot of more development into the tool, so it means that there's a lot of hot fixes and kind of plugins that have now been developed to work well with other applications like Timberline from Sage. So, I mean, there's a wide range of things that you can do with the tool. Whether you're using Excel as your standard spreadsheet type of cost estimating database, or whether you're using another application like Sage Timberline, or even if you have nothing and you just do it the old-fashioned hand drafting way with a calculator. So what are the benefits of Autodesk Quantity Takeoff, which most people abbreviate as QTO? Well, the better the productivity, meaning that because you're doing things digitally, you can create documentation faster, automate tedious drafting tasks, so you don't have to do things more than once, because you can develop templates and catalogs, which is something that I'll show you in just a few moments. And that reduces errors in coordination by avoiding quantifying things twice, or including things or missing things that were not taken into account the first time around. Also, one of the best things about QTO is that it supports 2D and 3D. So whatever workflow you currently have, if let's say you only use PDFs, or if you have digital images that you scan from drawings to track and scan your, start your quantification and estimating process, you can integrate this into your workflow, so you can use the tool to compile maybe the best of both worlds. So you can still use the same techniques of bringing in images and PDFs, but you can also now integrate BIM models, and it produces a faster and more efficient workflow if you do it that way. But it means that it allows to work both ways and combine them even at the same time. So one of the things that you'll see if you ever implement QTO in a firm's workflow is there's minimal training needed, because the tool is kind of based on an existing engine, which is the DWF engine for Autodesk. For those of you who don't know, DWF is like a digital format for viewing plans and exporting out your data out of programs like AutoCAD, Revit, and so forth. But it does contain a lot more functionality. And because it's based on kind of the same engine, you'll see a lot of familiar tools, and It's a very light program, so it doesn't have a million tools. It's not really designed for drafting. It's more just tailored for quantifying, getting the data that you have to now reuse it. So there's AutoCAD functionality, so it means that you can import CAD drawings if you have them available. And like I said, it's going to be a familiar user interface. So if you ever had Autodesk program running in your computer, you'll see a lot of tools that are very familiar, especially if you use the DWF format. And when it comes to collaboration and integration, it has a lot of formats that are compatible. DWG being the kind of widest and broadest technology, which allows you to work with pretty much any program out there that exports to a DWG. It doesn't matter what program it is. It could be ArchiCAD, Vectorworks, I mean, you name it. As long as they export to DWG, you can use them. So there's data exchange. So if you have Excel, if you have even, like I said, depending on if you have the plugin running, you can tie it into Sage Timberline. And again, there's more programs that are partnering with Autodesk to allow a more streamlined workflow between database cost estimating and the process of quantifying and mapping. And of course, there's visualization side. The visualization side will allow you to take the model, if you have a BIM model from programs like Revit, to not only be able to track and see what objects you have in the model, but from a palette, you can define what elements are what, how many you have, and then highlight them in the model. So there's a lot of visualization integration. So it makes it very flexible, very easy to kind of manipulate what you're tracking. And again, it's just because it's running with a very common engine, which is a DWF. So you can start using it right off the bat. I mean, there's a very little setup, except for if you don't want to use the default catalogs, or if you don't want to use, you can use your Excel spreadsheets, and I'll tell you a little bit of tips on how you can go about using your Excel data. But again, you can work faster because, I mean, this tool is purpose-built for cost estimator. You can search for anything based on what you click on in the plan, common building components, and the good thing is you can even have custom parameters, or at least have the ability of creating custom parameters in a program like Revit, where based on that parameter you can search and filter elements in a project. So it allows you for more quickly and easily search and find of common elements in a building. And also, like I said, it automates tedious counting tasks because you don't have to do it every time. You can just do a search by element, by any parameter, and it will find them. And that's something that I'll show you hands-on in just a few moments. And again, you can start working more efficiently with minimal training. So let's start with the first thing, which is model takeoff. Extending the power of BIM, which is if you already have a program like Revit, or even if you just you received models that came from a consultant or whoever you work with, you can use them just as is. The only thing you have to request is just that they export the model along with the plans, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. You can, I'm going to open Revit so you can see how the whole process works. It's pretty simple. Again, the good thing about using a BIM model is that you can do one single click model takeoff, which what it does is it maps whatever you click on, highlights the whole thing that is based on the same parameter or similar, and then it automatically maps it to an assembly or an item that has already a value and a way of quantifying the object. This is just I'll actually skip this. Search takeoff, and let me show you because it's a lot easier when you see things than when you just mention it. Here, quantity takeoff is a very simple. It even has a simple interface even when you start. So you have the new project, open project, and view example. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, if you start a new project, and I'll just go through the process, you just give it a name, where it's going to go. Let me just do another test, 1, 2, 3. Now, what I'll see here is what the default unit system is going to be and the currency. I'm going to use a catalog. Really, this is the heart and core of your projects in QTO. The catalog is the way of organizing your models and your data into assembly, pretty much what you would do with an Excel spreadsheet or with a estimating program. It will pretty much generate all the data that you already have and allows you later on to link and map it to the model or to a 2D element if you have a plan, if you don't have a BIM model. So if I start off with, let's say, a CSI 48 or a uniform at a CSI 16, These are the defaults, but if you have the plugin for Timberline, for instance, you will have the Sage Timberline catalog here. If you have an Excel spreadsheet, you can map it the first time around, save as a catalog, and then you can show it in the list as well again. So anyway, for now I'm going to use the CSI 48. Hit next. It will prompt me to add the models. So this is what I was saying before. You can ask the architect or engineer or whoever your consultant is. You can even work with civil drawings the same way as you do with a building. So if you have a site, you can also quantify the site. Now, for this, all I did was get this this DWG file from a program like Revit. More and more architects and engineers are using Revit as a standard platform, so it will be something that you can get from them easily. It will take only the same amount of time that it takes to export to AutoCAD or export to even printing. So what I'll do is I'll just show you how easy it is really to get this from anyone that you work with, whether they're using Revit or they're using other applications. As long as they're BIM, I'll start with BIM. And that's really one of the big benefits of QTO, the ability of taking that smart model and use it. Now, doesn't mean that you cannot work with PDFs, or doesn't mean that you cannot work with scan drawings or just simple images, or even if you have no BIM models and you just have AutoCAD, you can use that information the same way. I'll show you both techniques. I'm going to start with this one first so you can see. So for this, I'll open a sample project here. It's just a residential project, and you'll see how easy it is to bring this from Revit into QTO. Now, it's the same technique that you can apply to pretty much any other BIM application that you have available. It could be MicroStation from Bentley. It could be ArchiCAD, Vectorworks, etc. Now, you can export this, and because it's Revit, I'm going to use the native format, which is a DWF. Like I said, you can also bring in DWGs from a CAD file that is exported out of AutoCAD, say that's AutoCAD native format, or from another application that exports to that. So what I'll do is I'll export DWF, and all you need, or whoever's using this, is to select what they want to export. So I'm going to select the first floor. I'm going to select the second floor because it's a 3-story building, including the basement, and I'll make sure I select level 3. And I'm also going to make sure that it has the technique for this to select the 3D view, and that kind of tracks everything else that is in the plan. So it means even though you're exporting in 3D, you can work on the plan view, and they are kind of linked together. So what I normally do once I pick what I want is I hit next, and I'll save this on my desktop, or whatever the location where you want to save it, and that's it. Just make sure this is a DWF, that you have the naming convention that you want, and it's going to combine it into one file. So if I do this, what it creates is the following. I'm going to go to my documents here and check this out. I created this file that is an independent DWG file that if I just bring that one into QTO, which is what I'm going to do, in QTO, where it's prompting me to add those drawings or models, I'm going to look for that file that I just exported out of Revit, and I look at all the other formats, by the way, since I'm in that area. These are all the different formats that are compatible. So you can bring in DWF, DWG, images, and all sorts of image formats: JPEG, BMP, TIFF, Targa, TGA, PDF. You can bring in, like I said, most common formats that a lot of cost estimators use are compatible. Anyway, so I'm going to bring it in, insert, finish, and then it does pretty fast and efficient translation. So now it'll just congratulate you. The project is complete. So I hit open, and the first thing you'll see is that it translates, well, first of all, the catalog. So this is the catalog that I was telling you about. It's it pretty much lists a category, which is called group, and then within the category you have assemblies that have a price and list of items like exterior walls, and then within exterior walls you may have your CMU, whatever type, your concrete walls, whatever type, and then it's just a matter of mapping. So if you have this built, which of course the first time around is going to take a little bit of time, it's a one-time thing that can grow and can be developed as far as you want it to go. Anyway, I'm going to hit OK, and what it does is it's now going to show me in the viewer my model. I can use, like you see in this interface, it's actually pretty simplified. So I can zoom in, Let me just minimize this right here. I can zoom in, I can orbit. So I have all the tools that are pretty common to anybody that's used any program from Autodesk, whether it's AutoCAD or Revit and so forth. You can use your standard cube, which is available for pretty much any Autodesk application today. So like I said, it's a very easy to use application and very, for visualization purposes, at least so you can see what you're working on. It does make a difference seeing things live and almost identical to where it came from within Revit. So this is Revit, this is QTO. So again, the good thing about this is that I have the ability of selecting everything in the model. So if you notice, in 3D I can highlight that wall, I can highlight this roof, I can highlight this particular component. Anything that I grab is going to give me information about it. Also, I can select and track things from here just by applying one of the tools here that I have above my toolbar, like the search takeoff or the single click takeoff. But before I get there, let me just show you a little bit of how this works. Right now, the interface in QTO is pretty simple. One, you have the view that you're looking at, which is a 3D, but doesn't mean that you can only work in 3D. You can go to what they call documents, which is your palette. And in the document palette, you're going to see everything that came from Revit, from that model, your plan, level 1, level 2, level 3. And then what it means is that you're seeing pretty much every floor, and you can also do the same selection and tracking and counting within the plan just like you do in 3D, and it does it once. So even though you do it in plan, it does remember if you go back to 3D. So it means that it knows what's been tracked, and it automatically kind of selects everything, not only on this plan, but also in the previews or in the next level. So it's really cool. I mean, you can see how everything is kind of selectable, and if you touch it, you can get information quickly from the properties about what the object is, where it starts, level 2 to level 3, what the name and type is, area, I mean, you name it. And most importantly, maybe the type and the name. So whether you go by finding walls that are based on the same name type or assembly code, or whether you're using it based on some material that came from Revit, you can use a lot of this information to select and highlight multiple similar instances. So this is great. Now, everything that you really manage in the project will be listed in what they call palettes. So on the window menu, you'll see there's a lot of palettes that are going to be listed here for properties, for looking at the model, objects, documents, which is pretty much everything that you see right now for that project, your plans, your elevations, your 3D, etc. And the model category, which is going to show you, let me go back to my 3D view so you can see what I mean. So right now, this model, if I go to model, you'll see that every little thing from Revit, as long as it was created under the right category, is going to be listed here. It means that right now there's no mapping assigned, so pretty much it's just taking off every single entity from the Revit model, or from any model that can be exported into a DWF. So once you have this, it's just a matter of mapping it from here, or there's another way that is pretty quick and simple. And what it does, it allows you to go into your catalog where it says takeoff. So the catalog is pretty much, like I said, your heart and core. In here, for instance, you will have different categories that if you compare it to Excel, it will be something like this. Let me show you an Excel spreadsheet that is kind of common. So, oops, I opened the wrong one, so let me open the right Excel spreadsheet. Give me 1 second. And here it is. So watch. If you do the following, which means if you have a spreadsheet that has different tabs, different workbooks. So you notice that, for example, I have here concrete, and within concrete I may have the different types, you know, whether it's for walls or whether it's for pads or slabs. I can just list everything for concrete, and I can use a CSI code similar to what I was showing you a minute ago. You can do the same for masonry. You can see all the different things from column enclosure to wall, or anything that is related to masonry and fireproofing, and so forth. So you can have all these different palettes, all these different tabs, and this is an spreadsheet from Excel. You can do the following. In QTO, if you were to start from scratch, or at some point without using this, you could go to import catalog, and what you could do is you can import CSV TXT. So pretty much you can have a comma delimited file that can be saved as from Excel, or you can have a text file that can be also comma delimited. You can have a data exchange file from GAB, and you can do a ATT, which is the default native QTO format. The point is, you can bring in, if properly formatted, and there's some tutorials online on how to properly format an Excel spreadsheet to bring it into QTO. If you properly format it, this list that you see here will be automatically created with preset information. So what that means is, watch this. If I create, this is the group. So right now this is kind of like a starting point, so it doesn't have much. So it's just kind of like a template. I'm going to create what they call a new item. Within that new item, I can pretty much, let's say I use the spreadsheet as a reference and go to concrete. I can select that this is this particular kind of concrete wall. And then if I go back to QTO, what's going to happen is I can simply give it a name. So let me go back to the catalog here. I'll give it a name. I'll call this did it on the wrong one. Hang on. I'm going to do on the concrete, create a new item. That new item is going to be maybe whatever the name, concrete walls. And then for this particular item, I'm going to give it a description, and it's going to be the one that I'm pasting from here. The type of calculation is going to be linear, area, volume, or simply by quantity, counting each one. So because it's walls, I'm going to do linear. So pretty much what I've done is create a new item called concrete walls from within, which is pretty much the description of this high concrete wall curve, and that's it. I'm just telling you some information. And if I go further, I can tell it that this is going to be represented in a color when I have that in a plan with a particular opacity. If it's 2D, so it means that if I don't take the information that comes from the model, the weight, the thickness and the height, I can type it in here, so it knows automatically that that's going to be whatever, 6 inches or 12 inches. And you can do feet or units or inches, whatever. And then the thickness, you can tell it what it is. So maybe this is 9 feet, and this is, 6 inches. So you can easily track this once. You can add a formula if you want here, so you can do wall length divided by the area, or you can really, customize your assembly object. So pretty much here, you can then add information about the material costs. Whatever by the length or by quantity, labor costs, subcontractor costs, equipment costs if needed, and you can do not only a length calculation but maybe also add area if needed. So and you can add time to it as well. So all these things you do it once, and you build that catalog, which is something that you can do from an Excel spreadsheet as a starting point. So it'll save even more time. Maybe the one thing that you need to assign is just these values. And some people, in the end, if they have a plugin like, if they have a Timberline if they have an estimating program like Sage Timberline, for instance, which is pretty common, they may not even have to do this and simply use the catalog to map the objects to that assembly. And this assembly already has the data in the estimating program. So all you need pretty much is the mapping. We're assuming that we're going to do the estimating here as well. So you can use it for both. You can use it for quantification and mapping and also estimating. So you can do it both. You can do it all here if needed. But if you do it all here, it requires just for you to build this library. Now, if you have a spreadsheet to begin with, it makes it a little easier. If you have a program already like Timberline, it just does a quick mapping, so you don't even do anything. So it depends on what you currently have available. And it just makes it easier on many levels to use data that would otherwise take you a lot longer to produce. If you think about it, with the availability of the BIM model, this enables you to spend less time counting and measuring and more time focusing on creating the estimate. And because of the intelligence inherent from the model through BIM, QTO calculates the search automatically through the information and takes off the entire model at the click of a button. How? Watch. So let's say I already have that. So the first thing is you already have an assembly within the category concrete, for instance. Once you select it, it's almost like selecting a layer to activate it. And then watch. I'm going to go to plan view, so it's a lot easier to see. If I do this in plan, let me go back to, let's say, level 2. Watch. I can click on that wall, and I have two choices. Up here, there's a toolbar that has everything that you ever need. So pretty much, learning curve is just learning this toolbar right here, and just a few settings on the menu. But pretty much, if you master this little bar, you pretty much can do every kind of quantification and estimate that you can within the tool. So that being said, there's an option here called Search Takeoff, which allows you to pick an object, and based on the object's properties, you can search anything similar based on any of the smart properties that came from the BIM model. So you could do it maybe based on the assembly. So watch this. I'm gonna select everything based on this assembly code, or even the wall type, which is right now with a specific name. And if I do search, watch what it does. It finds every single item that is the same type, and it puts it right on that. In this, well, actually, he hasn't done it yet. But once you select it, you can add it, and there's an option for mapping this into that category. So to do it that way, and even quicker without having to do it twice, there's an option here called One Click, and let me just show you. This is the one. It's called One Single Click Auto Takeoff. It's the fastest tool that you will ever use. What it does is you can select one object, and you can do the whole selection or one element by the same type. And once it does it, like I said, based on selection, so you can select the element. Watch this. You can easily now see in the takeoff that within this category, oops, I actually did it the opposite. You have to make sure you select the category first. This is something I skipped. So you select this category, concrete walls. Then once you do, you can do the one-click takeoff. So once I do this, watch how it went to the category, concrete walls, and it'll give you the information that you want. And if I keep doing it, automatically it will start populating. And like I said, this is one way. You can do it based on the same category, so you don't have to do it manually. And watch. Now within, oops, just make sure that you don't move your mouse around because it just makes it disappear. Now look at this. I have all my walls listed here on that pull down with all the ones that I've selected, and because they come with all this information about their height, the thickness, and so forth, you can reuse that parameter for adding formulas to it if you wanted to. So for instance, if I go back to my properties here, I could use an assembly that would be based, let's say, for this, the one for concrete right here. And you can add what they call a formula. You can do it from here, or there's a workbook that I didn't show you, which is another way of adding information. So for the concrete category, for this wall, I can assign a formula right here. So the formula is just any kind of a mathematical, division and simple arithmetic. So you can do divisions, multiplications, and even more complex formulas. But anyway, so you can really add a lot more information to it one time, so you don't have to do this every time. Let's say you continue building your catalog by adding new categories and new types of elements as far as kind of groups where things are going to be mapped down the road. So at any point, you can save and export the catalog for future uses. So you could save this catalog that contains all this information about cost, about pricing, about the naming and the formulas and how it's going to be calculated. And all you do later on is map it, whether it's clicking one by one, do a search by type, or even better, if you are kind of working in a firm that is an AEC firm that has the architects, engineers in-house, then it's a more integrated workflow, because all you do is, if they send you a new model, when you go to the model view properties, and let me just do that for a second. Let me go back to the 3D view and watch this. This is pretty cool. You can simply go to your model elements. They already have a list here of all your walls. You can see all the wall types like the interior here, and you can see that there may be all these interior partitions with whatever the name type. You can select them all. It highlights them all in the model, as you can see here. I don't know if you see them in yellow. Let me zoom in a little closer. If you notice here, all the walls you select are being selected from the palette here. So what I mean is, once I grab all these walls, I can right-click, and I can take them off to an item. This is great because it's an additional feature that allows you to map once these items are new to the category that exists for them to be now concrete walls. So when I select them, watch this, automatically they're mapped. And when I go now to my takeoff tab, you'll see them all listed here. And if now all I do is create a report for saying, what is now the total cost, I can just keep exporting. So really the power of QTO lies on the catalog. If you build it, you can really have it as kind of automated as possible, because then next time you get a new model, and typically some people do this at milestones, different milestones in the project, because it's pretty static. It doesn't have a link. So when you get a new model, what will happen is it will remember the mapping, and there's even a feature called compare, where you can compare things that exist, and it will know what's added and what is not. So it will not only show you a numerical value of what the differences are between the older documents and the newer, but it also show you color-coded what's deleted and what's added in plan view. So it's really cool, and that's a nice feature that the DWF engine has, to the ability of comparing graphically what the differences are between one revision plan and the next submittal. So at least you will know. It's not, even though it's not linked, and you have to kind of remap it again, it will remember what the differences are, so you don't have to start over from scratch. And it will pretty much allows you to compare and add on to what existed. And better yet, if in the previous takeoff you didn't add a particular component that wasn't there, you can save the QTO catalog from now on and reuse it in the next takeoff. So it means that you can continue developing further that kind of database template that you're developing and use it on the next calculation or even on the next project. So this is just a little kind of quick overview of how things are mapped, but it's not the only thing. I mean, you can do a lot more. But let me go on a sequence so you don't get lost. So just give me 1 second. That way I can show you what I wanted to show you. So what I'm going to show you is more of, all right, so you have the tools. I talked about those. You have 2D tools, which I'm going to mention in just a few moments, and I'm just going to go straight to it. So the beam takeoff, which is what I explained, works with, if you want to do the method that I just showed, you can do it directly from Revit Architecture, MEP Instructure, from AutoCAD Architecture, AutoCAD MEP, and Civil 3D. Now, there's other workflows that work similar using a DWG format, so it depends on what you have available at hand. But even then, if you bring in a model from, let's say, another program like ArchiCAD, has a DWG, you open that one in AutoCAD Architecture, for instance, and you can export it as a DWF. So there's different workflows, that's what I mean. And there's a lot that has been established. There's a lot more information online, even on YouTube. If you go on YouTube, you'll probably find, dozens of tutorials on how to get started on using certain things. Even the Timberline plugin, you may find in the Autodesk YouTube channel how to use that if you have that program running. So again, exporting it, I talked about it, is a simple process. Again, there's a lot more information that comes in from the program. I think the critical thing is developing the catalog, and that's something that you can build, like you see here, based on, you can start from scratch doing a right click and give it a name, like exterior doors, and then within exterior doors you have the double flush, whatever size, and how is it going to calculate it and quantify it. All that information can be saved as a catalog. That catalog, like I said, can come in from Excel, can come in from, if you have the plugin running, depending on the estimating tool, from Timberline, or it can be created from scratch and saved for future projects. Now, also, that catalog will include all this information about the material costs, how it's going to be calculated, any formula within, and so forth. And like I showed just a couple minutes ago, one of the beauties of using BIM models is the ability of all that takeoff that gets generated from the model can be even mapped easily from the list of items. So if you know what the item is, which can be easily selected from 3D, from plan, or from a list of pulled, a drop-down list like you see here by category, then you can easily just grab those and map it to the right category by a simple right click. Now, takeoff organization and filtering, I think that's where it gets really interesting. When you have a lot of content, when it comes to developing a database, you can see that that database is going to be listed based on whatever organizational discipline or guideline that you use, whether CSI or the work breakdown system or whatever. You can filter out, so you don't have to do it specifically, listing everything and kind of browsing through all the different numbering sequences. So you can browse and custom filter. So you can do filters by maybe concrete, within concrete, maybe cast-in-place concrete, or precast, and so forth. So once you type in the word and say concrete, automatically it will find and only show anything that is related to concrete that you have in your list. So it makes it really easy for you to find what you're looking for, to activate the layer, which is really just the naming, and then you can draw and start picking things for it. Like I said, it gives you different techniques. And one of the things is that if you highlight an object, and this is something I didn't show you, if you highlight an object that's already been quantified, you can make it visible in any view that is available. So if they send you the ceiling plans, the elevations, the 3D, it's going to list it just like you see here, so you can track and make sure that that's the right component. So talk about coordination errors. You know that whatever you select that has been already mapped is the real thing. So instead of manually tracking pages, if you do it by hand and with a calculator, this is something that is more streamlined and pretty, I don't know, it's pretty visual. So, you know, you don't run into problems. Now, like I said, you can work in different levels. The way you organize your screen is just the only, pretty much three things you see. The workbook that allows you to list and things more values wider, in a wider kind of view, but at the same time to add formulas to it and maybe do a little more organization here. But then you can also use the palettes to document your components. Now, you can add notes, and this is another built-in capability of QTO. Some people use it to make revisions and markups. So if you want to do revisions and markups, one of the beauties is this DWF can be linked directly into Revit or directly into AutoCAD. So whether you use, or not necessarily AutoCAD, any AutoCAD-based platform, whether it's Civil 3D, AutoCAD Architecture, AutoCAD MEP, what that means is that if any of your consultants has Revit, for instance, running, or AutoCAD, they can link this into the actual sheet or view, and they'll be able to automatically overlay on top of their model. And those notes will behave like layers. So they'll be able to turn the visibility off on those layers as they go through the revisions, and they can check for those changes and questions that you send them. Like for instance here, please clarify the wall type. So it means that any doubts that you may have can be even addressed in a digital format, going green without having to send emails, you know, all the time, or you know, send a red line regular floor plan printed so they can make the they can later on see and make the changes. So it's another way that you can go totally green without having to print anything. That's one thing. You can legend, and it's something that you'll see here on the right side. Anything that you actually everything that you quantify in any given view, it could be in a plan, it could be in 3D, you can add a legend to it. So you can add a legend on, and you can do it in multiple views at once. You don't have to do this in every single plan elevation section. You can filter out this information. You can do it just to show the different types of walls. You can show it to show you just the slab type with the square footage, or not showing it with a different color or not. So you can show all this information if you wanted to, just so you have that in a more visual representation. And that's really it when it comes to 3D BIM models. I mean, there's a very easy integration between the model. But let's say you don't have BIM, or even better, I know firms that have used QTO, but they don't have BIM models as early as they would like to, and they just start with some basic conceptual schematic plan that they may receive. So once they have some kind of conceptual schematic plans, you don't have to wait for the model to be built. You can start using images, scan drawings, you can start using PDFs as they are, or DWGs if you have them. So if you do this, these are a couple of examples of plans. One of the best things is the ability of scaling your images to real scale. Again, if it's images, you're kind of estimating, so it's not an accurate science. So it means that you're I wouldn't say eyeballing, but you're still not snapping to anything. It's not a vector like AutoCAD. So if you're using PDFs, you can bring them in, you can scale them using reference points, and you can just tell what knowing only one dimension in your plan or elevation will help you tell what the distance is. So you can click on 2 points on a door element, for example, and that will define the width. If you know that width is 3 feet, then you can type it in, and then it automatically resizes to the right size, giving you the ability to then start tracing and drawing manually. So once you set these units, you can scale your images if they're just pictures or PDFs, and then you can start manually taking off, but in a more dynamic way. So it means that even though it's, you know, you're taking it off kind of on a manual, so it means that you could do this like you do it on a, you know, hand drafting, just with a piece of pen and paper. It keeps track of all the things, and it behaves similar to what I showed you not long ago, where I mentioned that you create the catalog, and that catalog is going to have that information. So in a similar manner, I'm going to show you. In a similar manner, this is what's going to happen. You're going to have, for instance, if I go back to the plan here, let me just show you in a plan view, for instance. So if I go here in plan view, this is what's been kind of quantified based on the BIM model. But what if I have like an additional deck here that is not even drawn, or it may be just lines that I don't have? Well, you have a set of tools here that are for 2D counting. So you have the one called polygonal, linear, where you can draw based on lines. So for instance, what if I had a wall here that is not even drawn? Well, I can easily just go to my takeoff, create a category, let's say for masonry here, and this is going to be maybe, I don't know, 12-inch masonry with something else, and then I can give it a description of the exact category, you know, CMU 3 by 3 by 3, whatever the type and category. Anyway, once I have this, and by the way, I forgot to add the most important thing, if it is 2D, you got to make sure that you add the information about the object. So it means that you have to add the information about how tall like the height and the depth and so forth. So I don't know if you remember what I said earlier. If you have this information, here, let me go back to what I was doing here. You can type in the height and the thickness. So now, watch. Even though I'm not picking it from the model, I can just draw an individual line that is now, when I draw it, using this tool for polyline, let me just pick the one here. I can start drawing a line, and not single click, this is the one. You have the different polyline linear takeoff. If I start drawing, notice that it has a 6-inch thickness, and even though it doesn't have a height, it will have that 9 feet high that is already preset. So once again, and it has the color that I told it to have originally. So you have all these different options, so I can start drawing my shape. You have all different kinds of shapes, not necessarily, it could be arc, it could be, I mean, I'm just kind of eyeballing here. But just know that you don't necessarily, and you can snap. Notice that I can easily just, you know, finish something, and even, don't hit escape, hit enter. So one more time, I can just add something here, go in this direction, and enter. So once you have this, notice that this is not something that I just have there. I can manipulate and move it, and that's going to be listed also in my object. So similar to how I did this, I can add an area, so I can draw an actual area, and that area, you got to make sure that you activate it similar to a layer. Maybe under finishes, I create a new category, new item, and that item is going to be maybe carpet, let's say metal decking. So if I do metal decking and whatever the size and type, once I activate this item, what I can do is I can add it just manually by using my tools here for area, and I can draw a nice area here, and automatically this is going to be mapped to that category, metal decking, within here. Or make sure that you define as area. That's what it was telling me, that it wasn't defined. So once I draw it, you automatically put it on that category, metal decking. Before I didn't. So even if you don't, I can select that object and then map it to the right category. So like right now, you can see that if you draw something without mapping to anything, it will show kind of on their own category, but you can drag that into the right category, and now it will be listed under that one. So it's as easy as this. You can just drag and drop and put them in the right category, and just make sure you do it properly. But notice that this right here already has that information, and you can represent the area depending on what you're tracking. And you can use what they call backout tools that allow you to cut through the elements. So that means that you don't necessarily need to just generate things that are going to be kind of eyeballing and round it off. So again, there's a lot more that you can do for 2D, and let me just show you a few more examples. So once you have the preset categories, you can start drawing your line work, you can start drawing your areas, and it's going to do a digital takeoff, but because it wasn't a model, you're manually drawing it. But it's 10 times better than drafting it by hand and having a calculator give you the linear footage and the total perimeter in the area. And because it's being tracked, you're going to easily be able to see it, turn it off, and control it from a palette as easy as you saw for the BIM model as well. And you can combine, so you don't have to go one route or the other. You can do both. So let's say an example of exterior siding. Let's say you don't have BIM models and you have CAD files, or even better, PDFs. So if you have PDFs, I'm sorry, CAD files are better than PDFs because you can snap to. Let's say you don't have any CAD and you don't have any BIM, you have just images. So you can scale them, and once you scale them, what will happen is you can draw areas and you can remove areas that need to be removed, like the window area within that part, and then you can organize your siding takeoff as easily as you see in this image. You can calculate the area, you can calculate the perimeter, you can calculate any formula that needs to be multiplied afterwards, like, you know, to calculate the amount of paint, you know, times the linear square footage or times the amount of, you know, element that you have. So once you have that, like I said, it's similar to what I showed earlier, where you have the category here, materials, house wrap, insulation, siding, and based on that, you start sketching. You have the tools for sketching any kind of shape. You have the tools to remove and edit those shapes, and then it's just as easy as once you do it, it remembers it. So it's a very simplified step, and like I said, this is just a matter of developing that catalog, adding you know, all the information in particular for that element, and you notice that in here you have a formula that will multiply the area for the actual house wrap, and you have the formula that will give you that information instantly in the value. Now the best thing is once all of this is mapped, you can add a legend like you see here, exterior on 2x6 GWB, or a sliding red on 2x6 the other color, and so forth. So this is something that later on, and I didn't show you before, you can create a report. You can create a report however you do it, from a BIM model or from a CAD file or from a PDF. You can do it in this case, let's say siding material report. Once you do, you can add the parameters that you want to list in the columns as part of your report. You can do labor costs, material costs, quantities, remarks, and so forth. You can organize the information, and in the end, it's going to list it just like you do a spreadsheet. The beauty of it is you can export this as an Excel spreadsheet and has all the different formats like PDFs, images, and so forth. So it's pretty neat. You can export all that information as a report that can be later on open in Excel if you need to open it in Excel. Or another thing you can do is if you have the quantification done and you don't care about the pricing, let's say you have a tool like Sage Timberline, you automatically map this to the database, and based on the assembly name, it will give a cost. And then from the estimating software like Sage Timberline, you can produce your estimating report. So whether you do it here or you do it on your estimating tool like the plugin I mentioned, it's not a difficult process. The cool thing is that it remembers the mapping, so next time around, you don't have to do things twice. You just know that whatever the element that is new, it recognizes as that type. Also, in this case, you can, for 2D elements, although it's a little more manual, you can do the same technique. It produces a report, and based on all the information that you have within that category, like you know, the thickness of the slab or the thickness of a wall and the height and so forth, it remembers that in those assembly names, and then once you map the element to the name, it will associate the cost to it, and it will associate how it's going to be quantified and calculated by linear footage, square footage, or by, you know, area, quantity, and so forth. So you can do this for many other things, like concrete grade beams. This is just another example. I know we're running out of time. The purpose of this is so you can see at least a few examples of, you know, how you go about even doing roofs. You can do it, you know, by valleys, ridges, rakes, eaves. you name it. You can find out the pitch factor and then just simply add it as part of a formula, and it's already part of the roof deck. You can assign it, and any other things that you want to quantify, flashing, felt paper, and so forth. If it's already built in the catalog, it's all matter of you sketching, is activating the layer from the catalog, which is pretty much that assembly, drawing it if it's 2D. If it's 3D, picking the elements or searching by type, and in the end, you just get a result of quantification and mapping. That mapping just assigns the assembly type item to the element that you draw or pick from a model. And finally, in the end, what it gives you is just a list of quantities, like I said, for everything. As long as it's itemized, then you can see it and list it. As long as it's mapped, then automatically you can track and find how many, and do reports of different types. So you can do the same report 3 times to list different things, from just quantification to linear square footage. You have it all in one. Doesn't matter. And this is just showing you different techniques and different examples of how you go about mapping, and whether you're using a BIM model or doing it in 2D, you can easily get the final report. Now, other things you can do is compare the models, and that's something I didn't show you, but it's easy to do. You just have to have two files that are you can do it with the same one, but as long as you get a new submittal, you import it the same way you import the first one, and then it will list it in the documents. And I normally recommend having the current date, so that it's easy to know what's what. And then you can compare the sheets that you want one against each other, and then it will color code the differences and also show you a numerical value of quantities. So it will tell you that there are 3 less walls of this type or 3 new doors of the other type. So you can export, create your own catalogs, and pretty much this just summarizes all the things you can do when it comes to not only using BIM models for purpose of 3D, for just geometry and smart data, in 4D for adding time for clash detection and phasing, but also going through the 5D phase where you're now adding costs to those elements that are already part of the model. And again, not just limited to being using just models. If you don't have them, which that happens early on in the design phase, you can still start the old-fashioned way, which is just with drawings that you may have available at hand, whether it's from an image, PDFs, or whatever you have at hand. So thank you, and hopefully this gave you a nice insight to the application and how you can integrate it into your workflow. I'll leave my contact info, so if you have any questions down the road. Not sure if we have time for some questions now.
Yes, yeah, we actually have a question, so let me read that out to you. It says, does Autodesk QTO work with Intergraph SmartPlant 3D software? SmartPlant 3D is a program that gets used primarily for mill and process design. It designs isolated in a model, and the asking for drawings may be difficult.
Yeah, for Intergraph, I have to double check because I know that they're always constantly adding partners. I know that they have, well, the first one was Timberline from Sage, but they also have other 3 more, I believe. So if you want, you have our contact info. We can follow up with you on that one. But when it comes to partners that tie in the data and their estimating database, that's something that is in the works all the time. So I know now they have 3 partners that they work with that they can take the estimating database, and it's just a matter of getting their plugin installed, and they're available for free usually. So for that one in particular, we can follow up with you. So just send us an email, and we'll be happy to answer that question. And just after we check to see if that's available.
Okay, the individual that did ask for that, you can just email us at webinars@microdesk.com, and we'll get that over to Leo, and he could follow up with you on that. Doesn't look like there's any other questions that are coming in. I'm just going to give it another minute. So if somebody thinks of something, please do type it in the question area of the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen. I'll just give 1 more minute, Leo. Yep, it doesn't seem like any questions are coming in. So if that's, if anybody thinks of anything, please, like I said, do email us at webinars@microdesk.com with any of this, these questions that you have from today's webinar. Thank you, Leo, and thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. We hope you found this helpful and educational.